Okay, I had this urge to rant about how short songs were getting sick of sub 2 minute songs or anything like it that just leave you unsatisfied and wanting more. Those songs are an awkward length for me, where I damn near don't want to put them in playlists, let alone save them. But for years and years, this was the way music was heading and had become the standard formula, especially in pop music. But it's taken me so long to get around to learning about this and making a video about it that we're actually coming through the other end of it and returning to music that ditches bite-sized content for something more unique and of substance. But let's look at the full story. Why was music getting shorter? And why is it now getting longer? Like always, history repeats itself, and there's some interesting trends and limitations that have affected music length since the early 1900s. But the unprecedented rise of technology, not only with streaming but even social media, have had huge effects in the destabilization of radio, with artists and labels finding new ways to make the most money in real time. And are we just getting dumber? Are our brains and minds so full and oversaturated that our attention spans are really shrinking? I'm not a scientist, but I don't know somebody who hasn't doomscrolled before, flicking from one post to another after a second of boredom. So while the world burns around us and things seem to get worse, like it always has throughout history, music is there to soothe our souls, distract us, and change our moods. That's the crazy thing about music and the role of musicians. To fans like us, it's so important and crucial to our daily life, but almost every single person in the world needs it too. And while I don't think it will ever fall out of favour completely, it's important it heads in the right direction and isn't consumed by greed and virality, and isn't treated as a quick fix and dopamine hit. But Jarvis, enhance. Let's look at each of these things in some more detail, starting with a bit of a history lesson. So there are a few eras of music recording and distribution that we can define today. From the early 1900s to the 1950s, we had the earliest vinyl era. These were originally 78 RPM records, but they could only hold so much music. At first, it was 2 minutes worth on each side, until it became 12-inch, which increased it to about 3.5 minutes. And this physically limited how long popular songs were. And given the various attempts to lengthen this, it makes sense that people had the same thoughts we're having or we had about short songs back then. But music consumption was also different back then. The introduction of vinyls was a step in the direction of consumer-owned music, songs people could handpick and play in their own homes. And again, this is something that just continued to grow and be an emphasis in the distribution of music until today, where it's as accessible as ever. And as we get into the 1940s and 50s, music was finally allowed to be longer with songs reaching lengths of 4 minutes. And this helped collections of music not have to be spread across 18 different discs, while allowing for more complex songs too. Saying that, pop music was just different back then. It followed a completely different musical structure, an AA-BA scheme, verse, bridge, verse. And it's so old that verses were actually strophes back then, an older version of them. But as we know, musical storytelling evolved with music, and changes were made to make that easier, like the more familiar AB-AB structure. A here being the verse that advances the story, and B being the main hook, refrain, or chorus that captures the song's emotional core. Add in your pre-chorus and post-chorus for a little more depth, and pop songs can't really get any longer without an instrumental break. This change happened over the next couple of decades as we entered the cassette tape era. They offered consumers an easy-to-use and compact alternative to vinyl, and by the late 70s, it was the predominant format for recorded music. But the question becomes a case of the chicken or the egg. Did the physical limitations inform this structure at first, or was this just all they knew, only evolving as music did? It's interesting because with all of these innovations and advancements, while ease of use was a driving force, it continuously allowed music to get longer and longer. And yeah, I guess the alternative would have been tediously swapping out records every time you wanted to hear a different song. Although at the time, all musicians needed was that one hit on the radio, because this was pre-album era where singles were king. And all of that sounds really similar to artists chasing something that can be a TikTok trend that goes viral. And with the importance of the radio, just like TikTok, the most integral place to have success dictated its length and sound to a point. The Beatles are often credited as major tastemakers and innovators in this booming era of music. They established all kinds of trends, figuring out simple things and difficult things before anybody else. And longer songs and songs that really told stories were some of those things that really took off. And if you've ever spent any time in a rabbit hole listening to a bunch of music from these decades bygone, you'd notice that a lot of songs are either really short or really long. Songs often had extended mixes and 12-inch versions compared to their 7-inch radio-ready versions. And while they often just repeated for a while, there would be the occasional switch up and unique take that would be sick. And who cared if it was just looped because it was a vibe and music to be enjoyed, not something to get out the way and finish. Whereas in this truncated era, an extended version of a song might be less than 2 minutes and a half, like This Is 4 by Twice. But from vinyls, we went to cassette tapes and CDs, with continued focus of allowing more music to exist and be consumed in an easier way. And this era saw the biggest peak in song length to date, with the average hit song being over 4 minutes long in 1992. But just like everything else in the world, the rise of the internet saw a boom in technology, with so many things changing quickly, and music becoming available online was a game changer. MP3 files and peer-to-peer sites like Napster and Last.fm paved the way for LimeWire and the eventual takeover of the online space by platforms like iTunes and SoundCloud, and later Spotify and Apple Music. But this digital shift almost entirely removed any sort of limitations to what was possible, and with it came the inevitable decline of radio, with music, like everything else, being at the tip of our fingertips, and streaming sealed it. You can find any song in the world in a matter of seconds, but behind it all is this scary thing called the algorithm. The science of technology and how things pop up in front of us, maybe like you watching this video, is a complicated and twisted game. And a big reason for the decline in song length, recording record lows at the end of the 2010s, were artists gamifying the song meta in a way that earned them the most money it could. And for this, we have to understand how artists make their money, and specifically how they make it through streaming. Touring, merch sales, and sponsorships are staples of a musician's income. Radio buying a song's license is a big help too, but only so many songs get radio time. So streaming is the answer for basically every artist in the world. I thought artists were paid through plays, but retention is actually key. For Spotify, listeners need to stick around for 30 seconds to earn an artist's royalties. And unfortunately, money's really important, and sometimes takes precedence over the perfect creative vision. So how did artists capitalize on this? Well, you cut the fat from songs. Who wants to hear stinky instrumental build-ups or wait for the story to be told? We want things now. And that's something you'd see in a lot of popular songs. It was important to be immediately captivating, getting people's attention and not risking them skipping it because it was too slow or boring. So intros were cut, verses were shortened, in a lot of cases pre-choruses and post-choruses were skipped. And don't ask what they did to bridges and outros, the pitches are just fucked. But it made sense. Why have 10 4-minute songs when you could have 22-minute songs? Getting paid per play per song encourages artists to go wide and skip depth. Financially, Pink Pantheress' Fancy That can earn the same amount that Michael Jackson's Thriller does, with half the content. But artists are incentivized to do this for a lot of reasons. With plays being front and center on DSPs like Spotify, artists are encouraged to raise that number up and take it to the moon. And it's much easier to get a ton of plays on a short song than it is on a long song. It becomes a simple math problem, and it's a way to inflate and abuse the system that pays them and gets eyes on them. There's a lot of under-the-hood metrics that determine what we see and what tends to do well, such as finish rate, skip rate, repeat rate, and playlist additions. Shorter songs tick all of these boxes. Long drawn-out songs can be a snooze fest and vibe killer in a lot of playlists and perfect for a few. And it's quicker to binge a short song and play it over and over and keep hold of those impatient fans that will skip as soon as it lulls. And all of this data being easy enough for me to find out make it the obvious business decision by labels and artists to maximize performance and give yourself the best chance of doing so. Now, I get this is a sad way to view music and art, or at least it is to me, but it is a business and a livelihood from the pop stars to Joe Schmo trying to make ends meet and follow his dreams. But this isn't entirely based on independent greed. We as consumers and fans have generally changed how we listen to music, and it competes with every other distraction or passion we have. Music has become, and actually I'll speak in the past tense because things seem to be better now, so music became just another thing that vies for our attention. It's just another thing that fills our time in our attention economy. And for whatever reason, while music and driving were once synonymous, I know people who listen to podcasts while they drive. We have so many options all the time. And obviously social media has played a huge part. Like I said earlier, who hasn't doom scrolled? And the fact that's even a word to describe this fucked up thing we do says it all. And don't get it twisted, I'm not necessarily saying that people are either scrolling Instagram or listening to music, it's mainly that the same logic applies. With so much music on offer, there was almost an oversaturation of it. And I think this left people less interested in music in general, but also consuming it differently. A lot of people will give songs 3 seconds to make up their mind whether they like it or not, or really whether or not they want to give this song a piece of their time when they could just skip it and listen to something else instead. Our time has become so precious and quantified that there's always something we could be doing. If we have a second of downtime, it's, oh, let me check my phone. And yes, I'm talking to my teammates on Siege who think drone phase is phone phase. Here's a challenge. Be alone with your thoughts for 30 seconds and actually scout the site setup. Sorry, I know when I cross the line and line crossed. But I'm sure you know and can see in your day-to-day life how messed up this type of thinking is and this technological issue we have. And as someone making a video essay on YouTube, I'm not exactly helping change this. In fact, it would be handy if it continued for me. But moderation is always key, and I don't feel like I have this issue as badly as some of my friends do. And as a music junkie, I'm listening to it almost at all times. Unfortunately, I'm a weirdo, and clearly the average person is glued to TikTok and Instagram, and it's those people who brought about this music revolution. Not only do short catchy songs make sense for streaming royalties, but it's also the gateway to worldwide virality on TikTok. Funnily enough, the platform mimics the ticking of time that creators have to earn the attention of us scrolling by, or music enjoyers pressing the skip button, all the time we're wasting on there. All you need is a killer 10-second loop or lyrics that people can dance to and make a clip for, and it shoots you into stardom or virality for a few months, like Rob49 and What the Helly. Or look at Pink Pantheress. As a uni student, she was releasing snippets of her songs onto TikTok to see what people thought about it. Fast forward a pretty short amount of time, and she now has billions of streams and is a leader in this short song era, with her debut album having an average song length of 1 minute and 18 seconds. And she never saw any problem with it, feeling like she said all that she wanted to say, and sonically it was all it needed to be. As a young artist, maybe she's just a product of the generation she's grown up in, and the social media influences that have shaped us. But her last album showed maturity and her evolution to create something more structured and traditional, if you could say that. But evidently, no matter what she does, she's a huge pop star, which says the most, and I'll get to why in a bit. But I think this makes clear why there was such a thing as TikTok songs, or a Spotify sound, or why you heard claims that so-and-so tried to make songs for TikTok. It was the obvious business choice above everything. It left songwriters and artists thinking, what's the point of pouring time and money into full-bodied songs when that 30-second hit is what they're really after, or even memes? And it became so extreme that a 2020 survey predicted that the average hit song in 2020 would be just 2 minutes long, half the length of a hit song in the 1990s. And thankfully, that doesn't look to be the case anymore. And whatever this did to the wiring of our brain took some years to fix. When we talk about our attention spans being shorter than ever, it's a simple result of there being so much at the tip of our fingertips. Sitting there and listening to a full-bodied album with 5-minute long songs and instrumental breakdowns can be a big time investment. We were at the peak of our need for instant gratification and maximizing what we spend our time being distracted and amused by. And with so much on offer, we had the luxury to be increasingly selective, until that one thing that could scratch that itch remained: a 2-minute TikTok song. Until this year. Or last year, but that sounded more dramatic. There seems to be a marked resistance against this TikTok meta or short attention span epidemic as artists push back and get back to substance, for a few reasons. Outwardly, this is definitely true. Some artists and songwriters have spoken about this, feeling like they can finally get back to making songs like this again. This proves how real this thing was, that artists and writers alike were almost forced into making a certain sound and song. But as is made clear with a few of the biggest names in music today, especially those that have come through in the last couple of years, creativity, authenticity, and uniqueness is what sticks and what works. Falling in line and copying trends is a surefire way to be forgotten, skipped, and replaced by the countless others who do the same or do it better. When we look at stars like Ray, Chappell Roan, Pink Pantheress, and Charlie XCX, they're also uniquely their own. And then there's the star power behind others like Dua Lipa, Tate McRae, and Olivia Rodrigo, who just seem destined to soundtrack pop life and music, who are guided by their authentic aesthetics too. It's these personalities and what we feel is truly authentic that makes us fans and drawn to them as stars. So this re-emergence of quirky, theatrical, emotionally raw, and artistically driven artists reflects this distancing from algorithms and repetitive hooks to something more personal and meaningful. Olivia Rodrigo mixes genres like it's nothing, blending rock with balladry. And she's a great example of how loosely genres group sounds together. As authenticity takes over again, genres aren't something artists try to fit into. Instead, so many of them embrace the messy and the maximalist and push the boundaries of what they can do. And even someone like Billie Eilish, who had established a sound for herself that was effectively known as Spotify core, that was minimalist by nature, explored a more expansive sound on her latest album. And lengthwise, Taylor Swift's last album was filled with longer tracks, a lot in between 3 to 5 minutes, just like SZA's Saturn. Not to mention a few other hits from the last couple of years like Messy, People Are Watching, and Pink Pony Club, all of which are higher than what legendary producer and songwriter Max Martin believes is the perfect pop song length, 3 minutes and 23 seconds. But the length of average hit songs has risen to a point that we haven't seen since 2018, showing a renewed interest in music and a return of our attention spans. And I think it's fair to ask why. We've covered the artist side, but that's only part of the equation, because as consumers, we matter a lot. Music feels as emotional as ever, to be honest, with really meaningful lyrics and stories being told. Pros in this music thing have taken to calling this generation of pop music recession pop, creating the soundtrack we can dance to while the world burns around us. It's bouncing back from a period of chasing virality to serving a noble cause, with greater direction and in some cases, even happier tones. Music has long been the aloe vera to the burns of the world, soothing the masses during tough times. And scientifically, going by a metric called musical valence, which is basically a scale that scores happy and euphoric music to sad and angry music, shows that music hasn't been as upbeat since 2009 and the financial crisis. I was too young to feel the effects or doom and gloom of that time, but I definitely remember hearing hits like I Got a Feeling, Only Girl in the World, and Bad Romance on the radio at all times. And sonically, so much of pop music today, and especially what's sticking, are songs that seem tailor-made for dancing that focus on energy, movement, and positive tones. Whereas My Husband and This Music May Contain Hope by Ray are great examples of this, that can address real relatable things while doing so in a light and fun way. Emotional introspection and depth takes a lot more effort and strain than hunting for those 10-second hooks that people would eat up online. And it becoming less and less TikTokified and empty shows that music is becoming freer and that brevity is an artistic choice again, not an algorithmic no-brainer. And as we move away from this trend, music can return to full-length songs with feel-good melodies, being less about performance and more about resonance. But this dip into the truncated was necessary for us to bounce back. Having this issue and this gap has allowed it to return with more intention, and in a time when we really need it.